Okay, here we are again in a brand new 3ds Max scene. I'm going to quickly go through the basics of setting up your scene. If you know how to do this already, you may skip ahead. But for those who have a 3ds Max window open up like this, a really quick reminder is to set up your scene. Drag these off. We will go to our unit setup, make sure they're in something that we recognize, like centimeters or meters. Set them together. You can do things like setting up your grid so that you can see it all across the world. We can change the measurements of that grid. And we're in a much better place now to start 3D modeling. If you don't want to keep doing that, one of the things that you can do, I like to put in something into my scene, just like a box. I'm going to turn off assign random colors on as well. We can save this as a max start file. And now every single time I load up 3ds Max, it's going to load up this file because I've named it M with a capital M, AX with an S for capital start. Okay. So the asset that we're going to make for this tutorial is a simple PS1 style barrel. So we're going to start with the cylinder primitive. We're going to start in the center of the world. And we're going to move this up to any sort of shape or size at the beginning. We want to press F4 on our keyboard to turn on edge faces. We're going to press M on our keyboard. Go to compact material editor if it doesn't look like that. And you can drag this on here and we can turn on high quality and model will look a lot nicer. We're going to press W and we're going to zero out our model. So it is exactly in 0 in the world. And now we're going to start thinking about our barrel. So how big do we want this? I want it to be 100 centimeters tall. And I want it to, let's try 50. I think that's too wide. Let's try 30. I think that could be a little bit fatter. Let's try 35. I think this looks quite good. The other thing that we want to think about is how many edges our barrel has. Previously, I've covered this before, and I've said that we want to have power of 2. So that could be 2. That's too few. It even bumps it up to 3. We could try 4, still too few. Let's try 8. That is looking pretty good. This is looking even better, and I think that's a good amount of sides. Do we need all of these height segments at the moment? I'm going to say no. Okay. So let's say we're happy with this as a base for our barrel. In fact, I'm going to, just because I said it is a PS1 style barrel, I am going to go back down to 8. I think this is plenty for a PlayStation 1 style barrel. So we're going to convert this to an editable poly or apply an edit poly modifier. We can now start to 3D model onto our barrel. So we have all of our different settings here. And the first things that our barrel needs is an inset. And again, I've got the caddy controls on here. So what I'm going to just quickly do is go to my preferences. I'm going to disable caddy controls. And now when I click inset, I have a window that looks a lot easier to read. Going to inset this. We know this is about 35 centimeters. Let's try something like 3 centimeters. And I've just typed 3 in tab to get that in there. And that looks like a good amount. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the bottom as well. And if I just click that black window, it's going to remember the last time that I did inset. So I can just click OK. Now I'm going to click both of these. I held down Control to be able to click both, and I'm going to press extrude. And I don't want this to come out in a positive way. I want it to go down in a negative way. So let's try 3 centimeters down as well. So now it's on group setting -3, and we can see we have that either end as well. I want the top of my barrel to have a little pouring nozzle. So how I can think about that is insetting it, but what I've done is not deselected the bottom, so I don't want that. I'm going to hold down Alt now and deselect the bottom, and then press inset, and now that isn't there. Okay, we can inset this by a much larger amount. I'm going to try like 25, and I have a much smaller cylinder here. I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to move this somewhere towards the side. I'm going to bevel this up by 3 centimeters, and I'm going to do the outline amount by not a positive number, a negative number, so it just has a little bit of shape there. I'm going to click OK, and I think we are now thinking about the amount of topology and polygons. So if we press 7 on our keyboard, we can see how many verts and polygons this has, 58. Quite often in the games industry, we count things as triangles because that's the most basic sort of number that 3D models are shown in. So I'm going to turn off polygon count, vertex count, frames per second, and I'm going to turn on triangle count and total and selection. And again, to turn this off and on, I press 7 on the keyboard. So now I have this, I'm ready to start texturing my 3D model. So what I want to do is add an unwrap modifier. I'm going to open the UV editor. Okay, let's snap this over to the side here and snap this to the side here so we can see both windows. If you don't have enough space here, you can try to make it so there's only 2 columns there. And if you want to see more space here, you can press Alt-W to fill this window. Okay, that might make it a little bit easier for you to see all of this, depending. You can also scale these left and right, okay? Because we only really need to see this quite small. Really what we need to see is this here and this here. Okay, all of these settings are important, all right? Now, I've applied my unwrap modifier and I can't see any islands or seams for my 3D model. This is a common thing that happens in 3ds Max. And what happened is I had something selected when I applied my unwrap modifier, and it's only applied the unwrap modifier to whatever I had selected, and I might have had nothing selected in my edit poly. So I need to just delete that, make sure edit poly is highlighted, and apply my unwrap modifier again. And now I can see it's applied correctly straight away because there are green seams on it. Do not worry if your one looks different to my one, okay? That isn't for every unwrap, at least when it's first applied, especially when we've been modeling, will look slightly different. So don't worry about copying exactly what I do. Try to follow the processes and understand why what I am doing, okay? All right. So what I need is my barrel to be, I need to be able to paint, lay him out so that I can paint the top, the bottom, and the side, okay? So I'm going to do a different process to what I did with the coin. And I'm going to first see what happens if I flatten by smoothing group, okay? So this button here, flatten by smoothing group, and it's going to lay out the model in quite a messy way. And this is not really usable, but it's definitely better than what it was before. We could technically start painting on this, other than if I click on this and I click on this one, there we go. You can see they're occupying the same space some of these are. So that isn't great either. All right. So what we're going to actually do is, just like in the second part of the coin tutorial, I'm going to apply smoothing groups to my model so I can use this flatten by smoothing group modifier to get a better result. So I'm going to click this and I'm going to collapse to, and this is absolutely fine. All we're going to do is select all of the polygons right now, and we're going to click auto smooth, and we're going to see that slight shading change that happened. And what's happened is, when we look at this, we have now smoothing groups that are applied on the inside, along here, on the top, and everything that was within 45 degrees of each other has been smoothed together. So that's the information that the flatten by smoothing group modifier is going to, or a button is going to use. So now if I press it, I get a completely different result, and you can see now this is much, much more usable. Okay. Now this is good, so I'm going to just move him out. This is good, so I'm going to turn on the element UV toggle. That means it's going to be just like element mode in the 3D modeling space. It's going to take this whole island. I'm going to move that out. These technically are good enough, but I'm going to do something extra with them in a moment. So these two, move over to the side for a moment. Again, I'm just organizing this just for my sanity. This is absolutely fine. We don't need to do anything with that. And now these all have some issues. If I go into my texture checker, I can see there's lots of stretching, there's backwards stuff going on. And what it is that it's wrapping around on itself because it has one infinite smoothing group going all the way around. So we just need to tell it to break somewhere. And I'm going to do it here in front of a nozzle. You can pick wherever you want. Seams will generally show tiling, but as long as you're clever with your texture painting, we will be able to hide that well. Okay, I'm also going to, if I press F4, so I can see wireframe mode, create a seam here. So I'm going to click here to break it again. I'm going to rotate around and do one here. Okay. And now, just on the bottom, I'm going to break, and on the inside here, I'm going to break as well. What that's going to allow us to do is use a straighten selection modifier. Because these are just a series of boxes with straight lines, if I click element mode and click straighten selection, it's going to straighten that selection out, but I can still see that there's some stretching going on here. And if I press it again, I might start getting a better result. And if you just keep clicking it, it seems to have sorted itself out. There is another button here, relax, which also can do something similar to that. And we can see that's also doing it. This is why modeling in quads is really helpful, because these modifiers, when it comes to unwrapping, as long as it's quads, will work really, really well like this. And the reason why we want UVs laid out like this as opposed to like this is because pixels are squares. And if this is laid over a pixel, especially a low resolution pixel, we can get bleeding going on the 3D model onto the texture, and we can get texture information, especially when it doesn't know which pixel to read to apply to the polygon. Okay. So what we're going to do with this one is, because we broke it here, we can straighten it out and we can relax a couple times. We're going to straighten that one out and relax a couple times, and then I'm going to straighten again, and on this one I'm going to straighten again because you can see the relax has bent it a little bit. Okay. This one we're going to straighten, relax a couple times, straighten, straighten, relax a couple times, straighten. So we have all of these, and I'm going to lay this out with a rotate 90 degrees, and this is the last one, again, I forgot to break this one as well. So I can press 2 on my keyboard to go to edge mode. I'm going to select this and I'm going to break that, go back to face mode, and I'm going to straighten the selection, relax, straighten. Okay, and we can see it's really nicely straight here. What you will notice, I have introduced a small amount of distortion going on here, and this might affect the texture. Now, if we're going to take this into a 3D painting software, that could be hidden fairly well. We're going to do a PS1 style texture, and that might actually be an issue. So how else could I go about this? But I want to keep this. Let's try and relax it a couple times and just see what happens on that distortion. It's still bending these lines, so I can see if I select this one, what's happening is, because it is supposed to be this shape, but I've told it to stretch it out and straighten these. So especially if it's like that, we can see that is the shape that it is on the 3D model. And this is the shape that we've got here. I'm going to leave it like this because honestly, this is best practice, and it's not very often that you're going to be doing pixel style texturing. But just for this particular tutorial, I wanted to show you a different method. I think this will be fine, and it's probably not going to show up too much. Really, for this particular one, we may have wanted what we would have. It's depending which is the lesser of two evils, basically. But these are all unwrapped now, and we need to pack them. So one of the quickest ways to pack all of these into the square area is by clicking Pack here. So you can pick rescale elements, you can pick pack custom, pack together, and pack normalize. I'm going to just do pack custom, and this is pretty good. This is definitely very good. What I'm going to do, because we're doing a pixel style asset, we want to make sure the density of the pixels is the same on all of the islands. If this was more of a AAA asset, I would try to maximize this space and take these, scale them up. But what you would see is that this is a higher resolution than this. Can you see the F8 compared to the D6 now? Especially if I made this even bigger, you can see how much higher resolution values to that, and that can be jarring in a game. Make your assets look a little bit Roblox aesthetic. So we're going to keep it all the same, and this is great. All I'm going to do is move these up and give them a little bit of spacing as well. Okay. And just pull them away from the edge a little bit. And the same for this and this, this and this. There we go. I could introduce another seam here, break that, and then I would be able to stack these on top of each other and probably scale it up a little bit more. But I think for the scope of this tutorial, I'm going to not do that. Okay, that's all good. In collapse this down. And what we can start to do now, actually, before we collapse that down, if you want to bring that back, you can, if you followed on the tutorial and you're angry at me, press Control Z a couple times and it will bring it back. We're going to go to Tools, Render UVW Template. So this is a new way that you might not have done before. And we're going to say this is only going to be a 256 by 256 texture. Okay. In fact, no, 128 by 128, a very low resolution texture because it's a pixel texture. We don't need it to be very high resolution. The render output, we're going to pick a sensible place for this to go. I'm going to put it in my documents and I'm going to save it as a PNG file. And I'll save this as UV template. We can close that down, and now we can convert that to an editable poly. I'm going to open up Photoshop. That's just loading on the other screen. I'll pull it over. And what I'm going to do is find my UVW template. So we can open the file location. And it should be in here, shouldn't it? Let's see. Documents. Nope. Apparently not. Apparently that didn't save. Let's go back to 3ds Max and open this. Tools, render UVW template, 128, 28, render, save it this way instead. And I don't think I pressed render, that's why last time. So if I go to my libraries, my documents, and save it as a PNG, and call it UV template. Okay. Now I should be able to go to my documents, open file location, and there it is. Yeah, so previously. Again, apologies for not doing that bit. Right, so we're in Photoshop, and again, it's another new software, but it's quite a simple one. If we want to zoom in on the whole area, we have this, okay? What we're going to, we can, press Control-0. So that will zoom in this whole area. We can see it is really, really pixelated and low resolution this is, which is great for us because what we're actually going to do is create a new layer, and we're going to put that on underneath our UV template, and I can name this by clicking it twice, UV template. And let's start with just like a base color for our barrel, and I'm going to start with our gradient technique that we've done before, and I'm going to go to here and select from top to bottom. Okay. And in fact, actually what I'm going to do is do it from top to bottom of our actual barrel. Okay. And I'm going to bring it just a little bit up there. There we go. So it's a bit darker at the bottom of the barrel and bright here, there. Now we know this is the top of the barrel. We know this is the bottom of the barrel. I can't remember which bits of these are the bottom of the barrel or the top of the barrel. What I should have done is move these, maybe the bottom bits underneath and the top bits on the top. But what we can do is revisit our unwrapped. And this might be different for you, so you will have to do this as well. But I can see this one is the top, that one is the bottom. This one is the top. So this is connected to the top, and this is on the bottom. It's a bit of a repeat in a process, and I know some of you following the tutorial are going to hate me for this, but I think it's going to be something. It's something that I've overlooked. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this down here, this down here, and then move this up here, this up here. So then we know where those are. I'm going to just slightly move these while we're here. You don't like, as long as you've got the bottom bits at the bottom, the top bits at the top, it'll make our life easier in Photoshop. Okay. So I'm going to re-render this out. It should be saved as 128. I can render that out, save. I'm going to overwrite the file. I'm going to delete the old one by dragging it onto the bin. And I'm going to drag this onto here and press enter. And now we have our new unwrap here. The reason why I've had you do that is because now what we can do is create a new layer, drag that under here. We can press the I key to get the eyedropper tool. I can, in fact, we already have these colors selected, but we could select it here. I'm going to press B on the brush, and I'm now on my new layer. I'm going to paint with the darker one. So I'm going to swap that over. You can press X to swap those over to the darker one. I'm going to paint the darker color here. And we can leave this bit absolutely fine in terms of bright red. And what I'm also going to do is paint the darker color on the bottom of the barrel around just the edge here as like shading. And I'm going to leave it. In fact, I'll make the brush a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to press X just in the middle and just bring a bit of brightness back, okay? There we go. So we've got a nice soft shade, again, in the middle of that barrel, okay? So we could say if we wanted some texture on this barrel now, in terms of like some damage and wear, what we could do is get a grey colour, and we can use a brush like let's go into here and go into, let's try this pencil hard brush or any sort of scratchy brush, and we can make it nice and small. And along the top of the barrel, around the edges of the barrels here, what we're going to do is just make it first. Let's always do this on a new layer. So if we don't like it, we can change it. Okay. But with the grey colour here, we're going to just clicking just off and on, just around. Okay. And we're just painting in. I turn off this, some edge wear around the edge of a barrel. Okay. And we can very messily do that there. So I don't know how to move this hide bar. There we go. Okay. We don't want to go up and down the edges because that's where it goes together. All right. And we can do some along here. We can again, just a bit random. See, something like that. And along here. Along here. And around here. Well, just a little bit. Okay. So we've got that messiness all around there. I'd actually like to have some shading around here. So I'm going to go back to our shading layer here. And around here, I'm going to go back to my normal brush. I'm going to press the brackets to make it a bit bigger. So that's the square bracket keys. You can change these ones. We'll make it bigger and smaller. Okay. Oh. Let's try and not do that. Let's Control Z. Control Z. I think I'm crashing my Photoshop because I made it very, very big. Let's try and drop that. There we go. Now, if I press Control Z, there we go. Just needed a moment to think. And I'm going to bring back my dark color by pressing I on the dropper tool. And we're just going to pick an unpainted one down the bottom here. And I have that color there. Press B. And I'm going to paint. And what you're going to notice is that because this is on top of it, it doesn't get rid of where. Whereas if I put that underneath, you'd see it does. So layering is really important for Photoshop as well. So we've got that, and I'm going to just also in the shading layer, just put it around there as well. So now there's going to be some shadow around the edge of the barrel there. I will do it. I'm going to drop the opacity to about 50% and just do it along the top. There. Okay. And bring that back up. Right, so we have this now. We would like to maybe have some text along this barrel. So we could say, with the text tool here, we could say danger. And we need to highlight this. We need to maybe give it a bright color, maybe like yellow. And we can make it a larger size. Okay. Let's try maybe like 16. And we can pick a font that is maybe a bit more impact. And let's make it caps as well. So let's rewrite it danger. And we can, I think that's probably too big still. Can bring that there up, and you can copy this and that, oh sorry, bring that a bit here. And I've used the move tool there. Okay, you can press V on V key so we could have that, but it doesn't look really embedded into the actual 3D model. I think it's like stands out a little bit too much. So what I'm going to do is just disable the view on that one. I'm going to right click and go to blending options. And we're going to try some bevel and emboss, and let's just see. Let's first do stroke on outside, and that's going to give it some like edge, and I think maybe a really dark grey is good for that. And we're going to give it some inner shadow, and we can probably leave that there. That's fine. I think that looks a little bit better. And we can right click, copy layer style. So on this one, we can right click and should be a paste style. There we go. And that goes onto there as well. So we have that. We could then go on to Google and I bring this over. If we look for Google grunge texture, and what we're going to see in here is, if we go to images, all of these sort of messy sort of pictures here. We don't really need a square one or a high quality one for this. I quite like the look of this one. You pick whichever one you like. All right. But grunge texture, we can copy the image, and hopefully we can create a new layer and press Control and V to paste the image in, and press Control and T and Control and minus to zoom out, to scale it right down over our canvas. We can see it there. Oh, we don't want to move that one. I've unsized it for somehow. Okay, press enter. And then we're going to zoom in again. And what we're going to do with this one is put it right on top of everything. And we're going to click on the blending mode. We're going to change it from normal to multiply. And you can see what that does for us. It just adds on all of this dirt and grime on top of the barrel. Okay. And this is just a really, really good way to get some detail into your textures. What I do know though is that our barrel wraps around either side, and there's a lot of dirt here and not a lot of dirt here. So what I'm actually going to try and do is using the eraser tool. So that is here. I'm going to go onto this layer. Now, if you've copied it in a different way, you might just have to right click on here, and there might be, if it doesn't let you paint on it, look for something that says rasterize layer. It would be like on this one, it says rasterize layer, if it doesn't let you paint to erase on this texture. And what we're going to do is, using the eraser tool, is just, we don't want to do it too strong. So we're going to drop the hardness all the way down. Going to keep the size very small and just get rid of some of that there. It's just a bit too strong. And I'm even going to drop the opacity of that, so I can really make sure that it might look like we have a clean line there now. And what we could even do is, if I go on to filter, other offset, and I'll go horizontal by 64 pixels on that. There we go. We can actually see that line there now. So I can instead, I definitely don't want all of that there. So I'm going to erase that because it's a bit too strong there. And here, what I'm going to do is use the heal brush here, the spot healing brush. And I'm just going to paint on there, and you can see it blends it in perfectly. Now, this will now perfectly wrap around with no issues. Any last sort of things that we might want to do with this could be going back to the scratch area, and we could go back to our brush. We could come in with a really small pixel brush size, and we could go to that grey, and we could try to, let's see, actually make sure it is for grey. There we go. And we're going to make it even smaller. We could try to, I don't think that looks very good personally, but we could just do some nicks and damage in there. But I think that's really why we picked that grunge map personally. So I'm not going to do that. I don't think it looks very good. But if you wanted to, you could even do some graffiti on there. Let's see. There we go. Right. So all we need to do now is save this as a JPEG, a PNG, or a TGA file. But we're going to see in here that we can't do that. If we go into preferences and general, I'm fairly certain in here there is a way in which we can change it, but I can't remember that off the top of my head. I'll put that into the next tutorial. So to quickly get around that, what we're going to do is go to export, a quick export as PNG. We're going to do this as texture. Turn off caps lock. Underscore barrel. Save. We're going to go back to 3ds Max now. And we should be able to go to that file location and just drag that onto here. And we can see we have a barrel texture. Now, 3ds Max is doing some blending on the texture sort of resolution. Let me see if I can change that, because it's making it look much worse than it is. You can see how smoothed the texture is together. See if there's any viewport configuration that I can do here. Let's try 128. 128. Set it to the resolution. Help. No aliasing. No. Let's try and get this into Unreal Engine then instead. So if we open up Unreal, we can see there's no real huge errors on it. We can see there's a little bit of areas where it might not map up together, but I'd like to see that when it's more pixelated in a moment. We'll open up just a blank project, no starter content, create that. We will go to our content drawer here, import, and we have our texture here. But before we do that, we also need to export our barrel. So luckily it's all the correct size. So we can click our barrel, file, export selected. We're going to go to a sensible place like here. Call this barrel underscore SM for static mesh. We can make sure smoothing groups are saved, not turbo smooth, and we can click OK. Go into here now, import, documents, barrel, OK, and we can generate missing collision, and we can create a new material. That's fine. We'll click import, and it should, because we applied the barrel to it, when we come into here, look a bit more at how we had envisioned that texture. Okay, and there are further things that you can do to make this more of a PS1 style aesthetic with post-processing, but this is pretty much the method and workflow for these sorts of PS1 demake videos that you may have seen. For you can see how the render resolution is much lower, and once we start to actually do that, you'll see how this becomes a lot more like a PS1 asset, and maybe that'll be a following tutorial to get that extra aesthetic moving forward. But other than that, you have hand painted and hand textured your first 3D model.